Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Finnemore. I'm the Executive Director of the Cleveland and Woodley Park Village, the sponsor of today's program. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the genesis of this program. It was really in a conversation with a member who was wondering, what her options were moving forward. And she was rather afraid to sort of, go see places, and she didn't know the questions to ask. And so obviously with 75 people registered, she wasn't the only one that had these important questions. So I'm really thankful that Jennifer Brown is going to be able to be here today and to share her wealth of knowledge with all of you. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. First is that I have muted everybody, and I'd ask you to just keep that mute on. The reason being that sometimes, phones ring and things like that in the background, and then the attention goes from the speaker to your phone ringing. So just please keep yourself muted if you would. The other thing is that we are recording this session. It will be placed on our website, and I'll put the information in the chat, but it's cwpv.org/blog. And that will take you to a recording of this program. It should be up sometime tomorrow. We do have an hour and a half for this wonderful presentation, but it's going to go quickly. And so what we're going to ask you to do is to please use the chat function in order to ask your questions. And then I will, Jennifer will stop at various points in the discussion, and we will field questions, and I'll be reading your question that you write in to Jennifer. Your question may not be asked exactly as you asked it, and the reason is that other people may have put something in the chat to me that's also similar, so I may just sort of combine some of those questions into one. I also ask that you please, when asking a question, don't make it a very personal, specific question that really is best asked another time where you can give many more specifics. Again, the time frame today is just going to be brief, and so we want to cover a lot of ground. With that, I will turn it over to Jennifer. I want to acknowledge that Jennifer is very special for a lot of reasons, but to me, Jennifer was the very first person that I met in the field of aging, and has a lot to do with my being in this field late in my career. She helped me place my aunt in a memory care facility. I was the power of attorney for my aunt, and Jennifer was instrumental at that very difficult and emotional time figuring out what was going to be best for her. So it's really special that Jennifer, who is recently retired, agreed to present this, and she was the first and only person that I asked. So I'm delighted that she's here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer, and she'll give you a little bit more information about her professional background.
Thanks a lot, Frank, and thank you everyone for joining today. We're up over 40 attendees, and I know there's going to be a few more folks coming in over the next few minutes. I greatly appreciate your participation. I welcome, as Frank said, please put your questions in the chat box. We'll do our best to answer as many of the questions as possible. But I don't want to waste anyone's time. I want to be respectful of everyone who's here. So let's go to the slide presentation. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to pop up the slides. So as Frank indicated, I do have a very extensive background in older adult services, particularly in the Virginia, DC, Maryland region. Although I've been in the healthcare industry for over 50 years, I am retired, recently retired, and I am formally with Seabury Resources for Aging, Forest Hills and Forest Side of DC, the Fountains at Washington House in Alexandria, Virginia, and Medical Services of America, which was also in Virginia. So I hope that my knowledge and experience will be of value to everyone on the call. And again, I appreciate Frank asking me to be with you today, and I'm happy to have this conversation. I want to again acknowledge Cleveland Woodley Park for being our hosts. Here's the contact information. And one thing I want to point out is Cleveland Woodley Park has a very valuable resource on the website of resources, of information, residential communities, of home care agencies, of many services in the older adult space. So I encourage you to visit their website and look at their resources that are on their website. A little disclaimer, I am not employed. I do not represent any residential community. I'm not here promoting, advocating, endorsing any organization. I have a lot of knowledge and experience over my professional career, but I may not have specific detailed information on the policies and procedures and admission criteria of a specific community. So I just want to put that out there. I will try to answer all your questions to the best of my ability, but I am not here trying to promote or endorse or advocate for any particular group or organization. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover the 55 plus community, the 55 plus active living retirement communities. We're going to talk about the 62 plus moderate or affordable subsidized senior housing communities. And affordable is a very difficult term. Affordable means different things to different folks. We're going to talk about the market rate retirement communities. We're going to talk about life care planning retirement, the CCRCs, the continuing care retirement communities. We're going to talk, if we have time, about the naturally occurring retirement communities, or the NORCs. And many of you on this call today may say, I live in a NORC, or I know about my neighbors who live in a NORC. But they are residential pockets, primarily throughout the country, but here in Northwest DC, where we are today, there are a lot of naturally occurring retirement communities that are just part of the landscape. And finally, we're going to touch on resources and who can help as you go on this journey. Let's start with some basic considerations. Your primary thoughts, your location, your current location. Now, I know with this audience, you are very much committed to aging in place. The mission and the philosophy of the Village movement is about aging in place, about the quality of life, safety, and well-being of living as long as possible in your home. So when you think about a new location, you want to think about, what about my current location is causing me to consider a move? And there may be very, very valid reasons why, as much as I want to age in place, my current living situation has some challenges for me to be able to age in place successfully. It may have to do about mobility and ambulation, may have to do about social isolation. Again, being part of the Village movement, it is key that you are engaged socially and active with Village members and Village volunteers and Village activities. But still, where you live may be very isolated for you. You may be disengaged from your neighbors or from others around you. You may live in a beautiful, large 3 or 4 bedroom home, which you've been in for 50 years. And as much as you'd like to spend all of the rest of your life in that lovely house, it's not working for you. So when you think about your current location, that's going to help inform you consider your new location. And your new location should also bear in mind what you enjoy and what's important to you today. Access to your faith community. Are you able to get to your church or synagogue or your temple or your mosque when you want to? Access to your physicians. You want to be able to get to your primary care physician, your oncologist, your cardiologist, your ophthalmologist. Those physicians may be very important to you, and access to those physicians may be important as you move forward. There may be other reasons why you want your new location to give you certain availability and access to your current location. And finally, relocation. Going from Cleveland Park or Woodley Park to Tenleytown or to Chubby Chase may not be a big move in a distance perspective, and you still may be able to access your doctors, your house of worship, your bridge group, etc. But you may relocate to an area where that does not provide access to those resources. And going to Loudoun County or Anne Arundel County, frankly, is the same as going to Colorado. So, when you relocate, you need to consider what you may be giving up, what you are moving for, what advantages your new home will give you, how it may improve your quality of life, your safety, your well-being, your security. And you may move because of family. You may want to relocate to be with adult children or next of kin or grandchildren or whatever. So as you think about housing options, think about where I live now. As much as I want to stay here forever, it may not be in my best interests. And when I move to a new location, how do those needs, wishes, desires, how are they met in my new living environment? Okay, sorry.
And I'll just interject quickly. For those that have arrived a little bit later, we're asking you to keep yourself muted and to put your questions into the chat. And I'll be monitoring the chat. And when we get to specific places after each of these sections, then Jennifer will field those questions that I give to her.
Okay, so what we're going to touch on today, I've already gone over the outline. The next considerations would be, what is the culture? What is the atmosphere? What's the vibe of the new living environment? How does this meet my needs for socialization, for companionship? Is it a faith-based community? Is it not a faith-based community? Am I the oldest person moving in? Am I the youngest person moving in? What's the general living environment? What amenities and services does this offer me? What kind of activities? What kind of entertainment? What about pets? If pets are important to me, if I have pets now and I want to continue with my pets, how will that fit into my new living environment? What kind of space am I moving into? How large? How many square feet? How many closets? How many windows? Do I have natural light? Do I have sunlight? What kind of views am I going to be having out my windows? When I move, what are my future needs? I'm thinking about what I need today. I know that there are certain services or service amenities that I would benefit from, that I will enjoy. but what will I need in the future? What could I anticipate as my future needs and the type of support services that are important to me or may be critical for my safety and well-being? The cost and affordability is a big, big factor. And we're going to touch a little bit on that today. And also the fact that some communities, some residences are operated by not-for-profit organizations and others are operated by for-profit organizations. Now, I want to be clear, one does not mean one is good and the other is bad. One is better, one is not as good. I spent my career in both very corporate for-profit environments, and I spent a good portion of my career in not-for-profit environments. And both settings can provide a high quality of care, can provide a good quality of life. So it is not a simple equation as I want a for-profit or I don't want a for-profit in making your decision on where you should live. But it is a factor. It is a consideration. Okay. In independent living, you're going to have a variety of living situations and environments. You both can be an owner of your home, your apartment, or you can be a renter. You may be entering a tenant-landlord relationship, which you have not experienced in a long time. You may have owned your home for 30, 40 years, and you're going to sell that home and you're going to move into a living environment where you're a renter and you're actually going to have a different dynamic as a tenant versus a homeowner. There may be regulatory factors in your new residence. Just because it's independent living doesn't mean it may have no regulatory considerations. Or if it's a really independent setting, it may lack regulatory oversight. So again, it's going to be unique to the type of living environment. It may be in a regulated setting or be in a very non-regulated setting. What's the admission criteria? How do I get in? The admission criteria may be strictly financial, or the admission criteria may involve some kind of application or screening process to determine your eligibility. Again, it's going to vary with the type of independent housing that you're considering. And we're going to touch on this a lot. Independent living is not assisted living. They are two separate living environments. Next week, we have a whole webinar on assisted living, memory care, long-term care, and nursing home care. We're going to focus today on independent living, and it is not the same as assisted living. Okay?
Jennifer, can you just define what you mean by independent living? What does it encompass, perhaps?
Okay. So in independent living, again, depending on the setting you're moving into, if you're moving into a 55 plus active living community, you're generally buying an apartment in a specific restrictive community. You're a homeowner, you may own an apartment, you may own a small single family home or a cottage on the campus. You are responsible for the maintenance of your living environment, but you're not responsible for the groundskeeping and the snow removal and the lawn care and all of that. But you are basically moving into a gated community that restricts the age of the residents within that community, that you are participating as a homeowner, and you're going to be paying some kind of community fee or monthly homeowner's fee or membership fee. but you're fundamentally living on your own. You're an independent homeowner in a 55 plus active community. Moving into assisted living is an entirely different scenario. Now, we're going to go through different types of independent living. And to be clear, some settings are totally independent, and some settings offer a little more support, a little more structure, and some services amenities that are kind of in the gray zone between independent and assisted. But you need to view independent living as you're responsible for your own living environment and you're generally responsible for yourself. In a 55 plus active living community, they generally are very large. They have a very diverse resident population. They're very rich in activities. So they'll have golf, they may have a golf course, they may have tennis courts, they have pickleball courts, they'll have clubhouses, they'll have pools, they'll have all types of fitness centers and exercise rooms and entertainment venues. And there'll be very many living options. Like I said, you can buy a small little single family home in a 55 plus active living community. You can buy a condo. You can buy a garden apartment. But you're generally buying real estate in a specific restricted environment. You're going to be sent to a realtor if you want to move into Leisure World. You are going to be interfacing with a realtor buying into Leisure World. You may be able to rent. There will be certain rental options, but that rental relationship is going to be between you and the owner of that property. And the owner of that property could be another older adult who has decided they don't want to live in Leisure World, they're going to live somewhere else, but they own the apartment in Leisure World. Or you may be renting from the adult son or the adult daughter of the previous owner of that apartment in Leisure World. But you're going to be in a tenant landlord relationship. And the lease that you sign, you need to be very careful in terms of how that lease can be terminated, what the penalties are, and what the homeowner could do to not renew your lease if you wanted to stay in Leisure World renting. And then the homeowner is going to do something different with that property and you no longer can be a tenant in that apartment. The 55 active plus communities may have healthcare and medical services. They may have a healthcare center. They may have a clinic. And those healthcare services will be available to you as an independent resident. And that relationship between you and that healthcare center, that medical center, is going to be like an individual patient to a doctor. I'm using Leisure World because A, it's nearby where we are in Northwest DC, or in DC if you're not in another section of the city. And it's a model that folks may be familiar with. Leisure World has a MedStar Medical Center on campus. Primary care physicians, specialists. There's a home care agency based there. There are social workers based there. But the relationship between you and those doctors is as an individual patient to a doctor. And if your insurance doesn't allow you to use those physicians, that may not be of much benefit to you. Also, again, a 55 plus active community is a big place. So you're still going to have to get to where your home is on that campus to where the medical center or the medical clinic is. So the location of where your home is and where the doctor's offices are could be the same as where you are today between your co-op or condo on Connecticut Avenue and where your doctor's offices are in Foxhall. That may be a bit of an exaggeration, but think of the fact that a 55 plus active community is a big place. Okay. I apologize for this. All right. I made a statement at the beginning. I am not endorsing, recommending, promoting any communities, and this is a small list of 55 plus active communities. There are many across the country. This Fitzgerald of Palisades is a brand new property that's being developed, and I don't know much about it. Leisure World of Maryland, I've talked a little bit about that. There are active communities in Montgomery County, in Alexandria, in Arlington, in Prince George's County. They're all over the place. They tend not to be within the District of Columbia because they take up a lot of real estate, and it's not very easy to command that kind of real estate inside the district. Okay, Frank, let me stop yapping right now. Do you have some questions for me?
You mentioned earlier that understanding if a place was a for-profit or nonprofit should be a consideration. Could you elaborate a little bit more on why that should be a consideration?
Okay. In the 55 plus active adult community world, I don't want to be over generalized. Those are generally for-profit operations, and you're purchasing a living environment, a home, an apartment within their campuses. So they are offering you services and amenities that you're paying fees for, but the operator of the campus is a for-profit company. Some of the assisted living options, particularly those that may be a part of a life planning community or continuing care retirement community, may be owned and operated by a not-for-profit organization. They may have a legacy of a faith-based community, such as Ingleside or Goodwin Living, where the origins of the community were originally in a faith-based community. A not-for-profit organization has to operate on a budget. It has to generate revenue. It has to have an operating margin. So a not-for-profit community cannot be operating in the red. It won't survive very long. But that operating margin and those profits, if you will, or the difference between the operating budget and the revenue, is not being then shared with shareholders, investors. The demands of the operator are not to generate a specific return to the investment part of the organization. There are a lot of organizations that are in the older adult space where there is an operating company. Again, these are just examples, like Sunrise Senior Living, and there is a real estate trust investment fund who owns the building, owns the real estate. So it's a partnership between the operating entity and the real estate company. And that partnership requires profits to be shared between the operator and the investment company. So there are demands on the organization to generate a certain margin in order to meet the expectations of the investors that are involved. And that does have consequences at times in the operation of a given campus. May have issues in regards to staffing ratios, may have issues in regards to some of the amenities and services that are offered. It may have issues in regards to the quality of some of those amenities that are being offered, because a for-profit environment has folks that have expectations on the return on investment. In a not-for-profit environment, I'm repeating myself, it has to operate in the black, not in the red. So they have to maintain a margin, or otherwise the organization's going to fail. But the management is trying to keep a balanced budget. They're not trying to make a margin to satisfy shareholders. Does that help, Frank?
I believe so. If there's any subsequent questions, you can put them in the chat, but I think we've answered all the ones that are here.
Okay. Okay. So when we move into moderate or affordable independent living, communities that offer subsidies, and I said earlier, the word affordable, we all have a different perspective on what does affordable mean. So I'm going to give you some very general strokes on this one. Your moderate and affordable income housing are going to be, your options, your living unit options are going to be less. They're going to tend to be smaller units, studios and one bedrooms. They're simply generally not going to be as much square feet that you're going to personally occupy. They generally will have 24-hour on-site personnel. The number of on-site personnel are going to vary greatly with the size of the property. And I need to be clear about these on-site personnel in an independent living senior housing. They are not caregivers, they're not emergency responders. If you lived in a independent senior housing environment and you had an emergency in your apartment and you called the front desk where there's 24-hour coverage, you fell, but you have your cell phone in your pocket, or you fell and the cell phone, you can reach your telephone and you're calling the front desk. They are going to call 911 and 911 is going to come and assist you. You're going to say, please come and get me off the floor. I don't want you to call 911. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that because they don't lack compassion or concern or empathy or anything else. They're not going to do that because they cannot physically lift you off the floor. And asking them to do so, pleading with them to do so, is not going to change the situation. So in independent living versus assisted living, Frank said, how do you make those distinctions? This is not assisted living. There is not a nurse on the premises. There's not a caregiver who's going to be able to assist you. The operator of that property is going to call 911. So put that in kind of in the back of your mind. The moderate and affordable homes, retirement communities will often have meal services. They'll have meals available. They may be limited. They may not be 3 meals a day. They may be 1 meal a day. They may be 2 meals a day. They're going to vary. And again, it's going to be specific to that particular residential community. They are going to be offering some activities and outings. There'll be some trips. There'll be some activities. There'll be some programming. It may not meet all your needs or may be exactly what you want. Depending on the property, there may be limited availability and wait lists. There may be a particular property that you really like and it meets your financial needs, and you may know other people that live there, but you still may be in a situation where you're on a waiting list, or if a unit becomes available, it's going to be a take it or leave it situation. This is the units available. If you want it, you can have it. If you don't like it, you're just going to wait for the next available unit. And the rental and the service subsidies are going to be based on your individual eligibility. So what you pay every month, what you can afford to pay every month, is going to be specific to your income and your assets, and it's going to vary from location to location. You can spend or you can pay less than $1,000 a month based on your circumstances. You could pay $1,300, $1,500 a month, again, based on your circumstances. But you're going to have to meet the criteria. That criteria is going to vary. A number of these communities that have subsidies, the subsidies may be through the county, they may be through the city, they may be through HUD housing. So there may be other regulatory issues that pertain to the housing unit, not to healthcare, but to the housing and what the housing unit provides, what it doesn't provide, what the financial criteria for admission are, and whether or not your personal financial profile meets the requirements of the moderate or subsidized housing environment. Okay. Again, there's an enormous list of communities within the District of Columbia, in suburban Maryland, and suburban Virginia. And they range in income criteria, they range in amenities, they range in availability, they range in cost. And this is just some examples of those types of affordable independent housing options. Some of them are faith-based. Some of them have no connection to any faith organization. Again, that pertains to the culture, the environment, the type of living situation that works best for you, that makes you most comfortable. Frank, do we have any other questions coming up?
Yes, we have a few. Going back to the discussion about for-profit companies, are profit-making facilities or institutions more likely to be sold with big changes? And I don't know if the person wants to clarify that. Gloria, if you want to clarify that at all.
Okay.
What I mean by that is that in a lot of developments, etc., you find constant churning of ownership where or there's mergers of profit-making companies, corporations, and each one there's got to be changes that for a resident.
I would say this is a very broad generalization, that for-profit residents are more susceptible to changes in ownership versus not-for-profit. That said, it doesn't mean that a not-for-profit community can't change ownership. very specific and recent example, the Hermitage in Alexandria, which was previously part of the Methodist Homes organization, was sold to Goodwin Living. So the fact that it was the Hermitage, and the Hermitage had been in Alexandria for a very long time, that it couldn't be a transfer of ownership. But in the for-profit space, the transfer of ownership is more likely or more possible. I think in older adult living across the board, in healthcare across the board, we have experienced a good deal of turnover in management, the folks working within that location. So as you're doing your exploration, as you're looking at different living options, you want to know about who are the owners, who owns the property. You want to know about the tenure of the staff, particularly the tenure of the leadership within any given environment. And if there are other service providers in that independent living community, what kind of tenure and stability are within the organization. When we get to the resources, one of the things I'm going to touch on later is that the Positive Aging Sourcebook has a complete page of a checklist of all the items that you could consider, think about, ask about when looking at independent living options. We are not going to go through that entire checklist today, but the stability of the management team, the stability of the ownership, the stability of any ancillary staff are important factors.
And Jennifer, go to, we have two other quick questions, and then I know we've got other topics to cover, but can you speak a little bit more about residents that call themselves independent living, but may have medical or medication type contractors on site? Any additional information you want to give there?
Okay. When you move into an independent living community, whether it's 55 plus active community or a subsidized or affordable senior housing environment, you can obtain any kind of support services that you wish on your own. And you can obtain them either through purchasing them through a home care agency. If you are within Maryland, Virginia, or DC, and you qualify, particularly in DC or in Maryland, for state Medicaid benefits, Medicaid, not Medicare, you may be able to get some home care services in your personal living space under the state Medicaid waiver program. In the higher end independent living environments, which may or may not be a blended community between independent residents and assisted residents, you may be able to obtain services, for lack of a better term, that are assisted living light. So you may be able to get some support services that you pay for as an independent resident.
Just two other quick questions.
Is you can be very, very frail and have a lot of care needs and still be occupying a space which is categorized as an independent living space. Frank, you wanted to say something?
Two other quick questions. In
Oh.
terms of the discussion of operating entity versus ownership entity, someone who
Oh.
actually owns the land, do they have shareholders?
So a not-for-profit is going to have a board of directors or a board of governors of some kind. There's going to be some fiduciary responsibility of the board. In a for-profit, it will depend if it's a private not-for-profit or a public not-for-profit. If it's a private not-for-profit, they may have an advisory board of some kind. If it's a for-profit, there's going to be a board of directors which are going to have an investment, some kind of investment interest or profit interest in the performance of the property. So not-for-profits are not going to have shareholders per se. A privately held company does not have to have shareholders. It could be held by a few individuals. And then a publicly traded company is going to have a board of directors.
Right?
Now,
And
go back to the issue of real estate. The management company, Sunrise, I worked for Sunrise for 4 years. So, and Sunrise was a privately held company. It went public. It was a publicly traded company. Then it was taken private again. So it went through, from its corporate ownership, it went through all those phases. But Sunrise doesn't own every building that says Sunrise on it. They often are in partnership with a real estate trust firm, which I assure you is a for-profit. And again, that real estate trust could either be publicly traded or privately held. I'm not an expert in real estate trusts. Sorry, Frank.
Great. Just one more question on this topic. But before that, let me remind folks that we are recording this and we'll make it available on our website. And I'll put that address in the chat. But the other question is, if you qualify to move into one of these moderate or affordable communities, are you able to stay after you've completely used or depleted your assets?
You're not gonna like this answer. It depends. You know, if you have, if you're down to your Social Security and you have no other funds, the community that you're living in, you may be only, your monthly fees may only be based on what your Social Security is. So the answer to that is you would be able to stay because you're being admitted under a financial analysis that assumes that your savings aren't going to sustain you for the rest of your life, but your Social Security has to, or some kind of revenue flow has to sustain you. That's going to affect what type of community you qualify for and what your monthly fees may be. So you may have no assets left, but you still have Social Security coming in, and that should cover your monthly fees to be a resident in that living environment.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And just another reminder that next week, December 7th, we're going to be talking about assisted living. Some folks have had some questions about that. This session is more about independent living. Next week, we will cover assisted living and memory care, I believe. You can go to our website and click on calendar and register for that, or send me an email and I'll make sure that you get there.
Okay, we're going to move on to market rate independent living. And there's a real smorgasbord of what this is about in terms of the living environment, and the costs and the criteria, the admissions procedures, et cetera, et cetera. So in a market rate environment, you're generally going to have larger units that are available to you. There's going to be a little more variety and diversity in terms of the types of living space you could have. They tend to be much more full service, more dining options, 3 meals a day. They may have little bistros or cafes. They may have bars. There may be alcohol available, either in the dining room or in a bar at the residence. You may be you're probably going to see more plush common areas, the fitness exercise room, a movie theater, an art studio. There's going to be a broader activities calendar. There's going to be more trips. There's going to be more entertainers. There's going to be more options. Now, I want to go back to what's important to you. If you're not interested in a pool, you don't need a pool. You don't have to have a pool, and having a pool could make no difference to you whatsoever. But if water aerobics is part of your daily routine or part of your 3 times a week routine, you may want an environment where water aerobics are available to you. Go back to that question of location. If I'm living in an environment right now and I can go to the Y 3 days a week and do water aerobics, they're not in my condo or my co-op, but I can get to the Y. If I go to a new environment and I want to do water aerobics, do I want an environment where there is a pool? Or do I want to live in a location where I can get to the Y, et cetera, et cetera? In the market rate independent living environments, they may offer some of these support services that borderline assisted living. Or they may have providers that are independent of the operator of the residential community that can provide you personal services. Going back to the 55 plus community, like Leisure World, there is a home care agency with an office in the health center on the campus of Leisure World. And what that affords the Leisure World residents is they can get what's called cluster care in the home care world. So instead of having to pay for 4 hours of service in the morning and 4 hours of service in the evening, you only need an hour or 2 hours in the morning or 1 hour or 2 hours at night. You're able to purchase smaller units of personal care. That service may be an independent business relationship between you and the provider versus you and the housing operator. A housing operator may have nothing to do with you getting help in your home, but there is an agency who is on campus who can provide that service to you in units of service that meet your needs. In the market rate, the higher end communities, they may offer transportation. They may have much more involved in terms of outings and trips, et cetera, et cetera. These are generally rental communities where you're going to pay a monthly rental fee for your living unit. The cost of your monthly fee is directly related to how much space you're renting, whether it's a studio when it's a 1-bedroom, whether it's a 2-bedroom, your monthly rate is going to go up. You may pay an entry fee. That entry fee is going to vary. Could be like 1 or 2 months rent, could be another number altogether. It is not a security deposit. In general, it is a cost of joining the club. And you're going to pay that fee in order to move in. In a affordable housing situation, in a moderate senior housing community, you may have a security deposit. So I don't want to dismiss that possibility, but that's generally going to be structured as a security deposit versus a entry fee, which you're not going to see again. In the market rate communities, again, depending on where you are, you may then have easy access into assisted living or memory care, or not. Or you may be in a living environment which is a blend of assisted living residents and independent residents. And that blend may be very much your daily experience, even though you're an independent resident, or the living structures may be physically separate. So, for example, sorry, okay. In some high-end independent living situations, the assisted living residents may have a physically separate part of the campus. Their living units are separate, their dining facilities are separate. So the assisted living residents and the independent residents, there's a good deal of separation. In other environments, that's not the reality of the situation. And although you may be an independent living person, you may be not receiving nor paying for any personal care. But you may be in an environment in which a number of assisted living people are sharing the same dining room. This is not a right or wrong issue. This is not a good or bad issue. This is what is comfortable for you, what type of setting is where you want to be. But I'll go back to the other point that was brought up. Whether you are in a 55 plus community, whether you are in an affordable, subsidized senior housing unit, whether you're in a high-end market rate, amenities rich, independent retirement community, folks are going to age in place in that living unit, and they may be piling on the support services so they can remain an independent resident and not be living in the assisted living portion of a community if it is a community in which the independent residents and the assisted residents are physically separated. In other communities, and this will be a feature that the marketing folks will promote, is that you come in as an independent resident, you pay no fees for personal care, but when you need personal care, you don't move. You stay exactly where you are, the same bedroom and the same living room, but then you become an assisted living resident, And those assisted living services are fees that you're paying based on your level of care. And those services can be very substantial. They can meet a high level of acuity, which means you need a lot of help. And they can be very costly, but you don't move. So those are important considerations. An
Jennifer,
example between Chevy Chase House and the residents at Thomas Circle. Residents in Thomas Circle, the majority of the building is independent apartments. They had for many years a floor of assisted living. I believe they are now moving to 2 floors of assisted living. Now, as a resident of 5-star in your independent apartment, you could get all the support services you could pay for, and you could stay put as long as you want. But if you really needed assisted living, if it was no longer viable, either financially or otherwise, for you to stay in that independent apartment, then you need to consider moving from your independent apartment into your assisted living apartment. Same thing with the residents at Thomas Circle. The residents at Thomas Circle, the independent tower, literally tower, would be very different from where the assisted living units are and the memory care units are. Chevy Chase House would be a different type of environment where it's a more blended environment. Kensington Park, it's a whole separate building where the independent residents have their apartments versus where the memory care and assisted living units are. They are physically separate structures. So they're going to vary. Brightview is more blended in terms of their resident population. These are generalizations. You need to look at the specific community. Frank, we got some more questions?
Yes, so you said earlier that the cost largely depends on the size of the unit and the amenities offered, but could you give a little bit more information perhaps about the range and anything else about this?
So on the subsidized side, as I said, you could, based on your income and your personal finances, you could pay less than $1,000 a month. You could pay $1,300, $1,500 a month, etc. In a market rate community, you're generally coming in in a small studio or standard studio starting at about $5,000 a month. And from $5,000 a month, depending on your apartment, $6,000 or $7,000 to $8,000 a month is not unlikely. What's included in that $6,000 or $7,000 a month? How many meals? What's the activities and event schedule look like? What are the other amenities that are available to you for your $6,000 or $7,000 in terms of transportation? So but you're starting at around 5,000 and up, and that's going to vary between Northwest DC and Montgomery County and Alexandria and Arlington and Fairfax, then maybe Columbia, Maryland, or Anne Arundel, or Loudoun. Or if you're going to live near your daughter in Colorado, those rates are going to vary.
Just 2 other quick questions, Jennifer.
Mhm.
You mentioned before about the 55+ active communities, and some of them may have independently operated medical facilities associated with them, and that the market rate amenity-rich independent living may also have those types of services. Can you speak a little bit more to what differentiates then the 55 active community definition and the market rate amenity independent living?
Okay, so if you're in one of these communities that I have on the list here, and there are many other excellent communities. They may have a podiatrist come to the campus once a month. They may have a primary care physician come to the campus once a month. They may have dental services on site. They may have PT/OT speech services on site. There's generally going to be one provider who's going to be that podiatrist, that dental clinic, that primary care physician service. So it's going to be that person or nobody. Or you're going to go outside the community to get those services. At a place like Leisure World, if you went to the MedStar Health Center at Leisure World, there may be a couple of primary care physicians. There are 3 or 4 social workers. There is several specialists that will come to Leisure World, to the MedStar clinic. So you could see your cardiologist, if your cardiologist is a MedStar physician in the MedStar system, at Leisure World. It is unlikely that a cardiologist, an oncologist, or any other specialist is going to come to the residences at Thomas Circle. Now, they have traditionally had a relationship with George Washington University faculty. So I don't know, frankly, exactly how that is structured today, but maybe they had more options than maybe at Chubby Chase House in terms of medical services, or at Brightview or something like that. The bigger the community, the more options. Bigger is better for some reasons, and bigger is not better for some reasons. If you want a big community because you like duplicate bridge, or you like contract bridge, or you're a Mahjong player and you're in a big campus, you're going to find Mahjong players. If you're in a smaller property, you may not get the same options for those kinds of activities. But in a smaller community, you're going to be more of an individual than you're in a larger community where you're one of 5,000 people.
Great, Jennifer. Just 2 other quick questions, then we'll move on. And I'll read both of them at once. Does Goodwin Living fit into any of these independent living options? And then what are the possibilities of getting special dietary needs met in a market amenity independent rich living?
Okay, so Goodwin Living is a life planning, continuing care retirement community. The short answer is yes. Goodwin Living has 2 campuses in Virginia, one in Alexandria and one in Bailey's Crossroads, which is like Falls Church. They have large independent living components. Dietary considerations. Vegetarians, vegans, low sodium, cardiac diets. It's gonna vary. We get into the regulatory licensing issues. In some independent living settings, you're moving into a building which is licensed for assisted living. And when you move into a building which is licensed for assisted living, even though you're an independent resident, you may be going through the admission procedures, the admission criteria, as if you were an assisted living resident, but you're not, you're independent. But because of the license of the building, you have to meet the admission criteria. And if the building is licensed, the dining services have to have the dietary options per regulation. If you're in a non-licensed building, I don't mean chaos ensues, but it's under different regulatory considerations. So you may be in a HUD building, HUD housing, HUD subsidies. The HUD building is going to have certain regulations in order to meet the housing requirements, housing and urban development. They're not going to meet the regulations of an assisted living environment, which is regulated under the Department of Health and has healthcare requirements. So, to answer your question, as best I can, is if you were in a subsidized or affordable senior housing living environment and they offer dining services, you're going to need to be very specific about your dietary needs or preferences. Any living environment, now the 55 plus communities, this doesn't apply. They are not running dining services. They may have a cafe on campus or dining rooms on campus, but you're buying a house in a restricted 55 plus campus. So they're not operating dining services like Friendship Terrace would be operating dining services. But you're going to need to be very specific about what your dietary preferences and needs are, and to be clear that they can meet those needs. If you're moving in or considering any residential living environment where there is dining services, you better make sure you have a meal and experience the dining environment. And order off the menu or however the service is run. You want to eat before you make any other decision.
Great, thanks, Jim. I know time is of the essence, so we just have 15 minutes left, so we can go on to the.
Boy, we got to move. Okay, so Goodwin Living is a life planning or continuing care retirement community. All continuing care retirement communities are not all life planning. The life planning ones, like Ingleside, like Goodwin Living, you are in fact buying a form of long-term care insurance. So when we talk about all these regulatory issues, whether it's regulated as assisted living or it's independent, it's not. When you buy life care, you're buying an insurance product. And again, disclaimer, I haven't been in the life care. I was in life care in Virginia in the early mid 2000s. But it was regulated by the state insurance industry, your life care plan. But CCRCs are built around independent living. The biggest component of a CCRC, whether it's a life planning community or it's a rental, is independent living is the biggest part of it. The CCRCs are a little like 55 plus communities, but quite not quite as large, but they're big campuses. They have a lot of living units. They have a large resident population. You have a lot of high-end apartments. They tend to have very high-end finishes to them. And even though, you know, you're in a CCRC or on a campus, your apartment is a complete living unit, washer, dryer, full-size kitchen, blah, blah, blah. Very, very, very rich in amenities, entertainment and lectures and cultural events and lots of stuff to do, art studios. But they're spread out like the 55 plus communities. So you may have a very lovely, beautiful 2-bedroom apartment, and you're going to go to dinner every night, or you wish you have the option to go to dinner every night. You got a good distance to travel from where your bed is to where that dining room is. These are buy-ins. These are substantial financial investments. These are hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you have to meet the financial criteria in order to be admitted. And that means it's significant assets, and I'm not about to, several $1 million. And it's going to vary. But in IL, in independent living, you get a lot of support. There's going to be social workers that are for the independent residents. They're going to have a lot of medical health care services on site that you can take advantage of. And they are designed for continuing care. So they're going to have an assisted living program. They're going to have a memory care program. They're going to have short-term subacute rehabilitation. They're going to have long-term nursing home care. Now you're going to hear some communities that are CCRC light. These tend to be the rentals, not the life care. And where they may differ is they don't have the subacute rehabilitation and long-term nursing care. And you may say, I don't care. I never want to see the inside of one of those. I get that. I understand that. But when you're looking at a CCRC that's not a life planning community, you want to understand all of the elements, all the services that are available and what are not available. And these are examples. The residents at Thomas Circle, the fountains at Washington House, both decided that they did not want to continue with skilled nursing as a part of their campus. So they both closed their skilled nursing facilities. They have assisted living, they have memory care, they have big independent housing. They have a lot of amenities, but if you need short-term rehabilitation, even though you never want to see the inside of a nursing home for long-term care, you're going to be going to a rehab center and then coming back to your home in one of these types of residential campuses. Okay, yeah, we're getting close. Again, these are examples of life planning communities. Knollwood, Vincent Hall, Falcons Landing, the Fairfax are military communities. You have to meet military criteria, or you have to have a substantial federal service standing in the State Department or some other federal agency where you have a high GSA rating. That may be the perfect community for you, or not. culture, environment, vibe. They're great communities, but they have a unique profile to who lives there. Okay. You see a lot of these communities have faith components to them, legacies. How much does that play into daily living? A little, not at all, some, a lot. It depends. Charles E. Smith is the only kosher community between New York and Miami. That's great. And that may be very important, and that may make you very happy. Or you may not like the diet, the offerings in the dining room, and what you can easily have if it's a kosher kitchen. It's going to vary a lot. And these are expensive propositions. The Mather, which is at the bottom of this list, is out in Tyson's. It's in the pre-sales mode. It is as high end as you can get. And you're going to pay for that. And if that meets your needs and you have the resources, and that's going to make you happy and give you a good quality of life, then go for it. We got to keep moving along here. Who can help? I mentioned I was with Seabury. I've worked with aging life care managers for over 22 years. They're great people. The big advantage of a life care manager is they are objective and their focus is you, not the retirement community. But you're going to pay for their services. But you can hire a care manager for a very specific task. I need to consider a move. These are my criteria. These are my resources. Help me find a good place. That's a very focused assignment. It's very specific. And you can control how much money you spend. But they can deliver a very good service to you in trying to sort this all out. There are other excellent care managers in the DMV. These are some of them, okay? Consultants and advisors. So we've been back and forth about the for-profit, not-for-profit. These are businesses. Oasis Advisors and Care Patrol are franchises. A lot of the home care agencies that you hear about throughout Virginia, Maryland, DC are franchises. Some are not. So how do these work? They are paid by the residential community. So they will say to you, our services are free of charge. They are free of charge to you. They are not free of charge to the folks that are working. They're going to get paid a commission by the residential community for having a new resident move in. And they are going to have, by human nature, an orientation to those who are going to pay them commissions versus those who don't. So they're going to have contracts with a variety of residential communities. They may or may not have contracts with affordable or subsidized housing communities because they don't have the budget to pay them commissions. They still can be helpful. But be aware of where the business is coming from. The business is coming from the commissions paid to the advisor. That doesn't make them, they're not good people. They don't know their business. They're not well informed, but that's the business model. And these folks in general are not social workers. Care managers are licensed in general, licensed social workers, and operate under their licenses within their jurisdiction and their profession. These are generally more business people. I'm a business person. I like to think I've been helpful here, even though I'm not a licensed social worker, but understand the difference. A lot of the information I gave you today is in the Positive Aging Sourcebook. Almost all your villages have this reference document, this resource document. It's online, it's in print, it's very comprehensive. It covers the waterfront, Washington, D.C., Maryland. It goes from subsidized housing and affordable housing through the most high-end, expensive housing units. And as I said, they have a full page for choosing independent living. A checklist of questions that you should think about and ask when you're looking at independent housing. I know Frank has them. Most of your Ds and all of your communities have them. It's online. Iona has a very good reference guide. As I said, Cleveland Woodley Park has a very good resources online. So there are other resources. Positive Aging is not the only one, but it is a good one.
And-
Frank, go ahead, Frank.
Let me just say also to our members that with the Cleveland Woodley Park Village, in your green bag that you got, hopefully when you joined, if you joined in the last year or two, we would have given you a copy of the source book as well as the Iona guide. If you don't have one, you can certainly contact me at frank@cwpv.org, and I'll make sure that you get one.
So Iona's guide is online, just like Positive Aging is online. Iona guide is printed. There's a Montgomery County Senior Resource Guide that's published by the Beacon. There are other resources in Northern Virginia. So you can get the Iona guide either through the Iona office or online as well.
And Jennifer, if I could just add one other thing. Our office here, located at 3601 Connecticut Avenue in the Broadmoor building, we're generally here between 10 and 4, or someone is always here between 10 and 4. And we've now created an entire wall of resources. So if you get tired of looking at something online and you want to actually see paper and see what their marketing materials are, I don't claim to have all the marketing materials for all the options that are listed here, but we do have many. You're welcome to come in and take them. And again, you can go to our website and get our address or phone number and just give us a call if you want to stop by.
As Frank mentioned earlier, there is part 2 of this next Thursday, a week from today at 1 o'clock. Again, and I'm very, very grateful for everyone who's participated, who's been on the call today. I believe it's close to being booked out. And we didn't address some questions that you had because we have another hour and a half on assisted living, memory care, and long-term nursing home care next week. Again, I want to thank Cleveland Woodley Park. I want to thank Frank for their kindness and their generosity in organizing and conducting this webinar. And I want to thank you all. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you,
What
Jennifer.
other questions are out there, Frank? Are we sitting on any other questions?
I think there was just one, if it was very specific to Knollwood.
Mhm.
If somebody, I think a veteran is on disability, can they go to Knollwood?
So I am not knowledgeable of what the financial criteria for Knollwood is. It's a lovely campus. It's a beautiful community. It's been a part of DC for a long time, but I do not know how the fees are structured and what the options are in terms of veterans benefits or disability benefits. I apologize, I don't have that information. When we were talking about the big CCRCs, Ingleside and Goodwin House and Charles E. Smith and Knollwood, and the general way of joining those communities are through the independent housing start. Based on occupancies in those individual communities, and we'll touch on this more next week, availability, you may be able to enter Ingleside or Goodwin House through assisted living or memory care. That is a it depends basis. But as a resident going into independent living, or you're going to meet the criteria for life care planning at Ingleside or Goodwin. When you go into assisted living or memory care, you're not going in under life planning. You're going in as a rental fee-for-service resident in those living situations. When I talked about the market rate independent living or independent living in a life planning community, you may go through a screening process. You may have to meet the criteria to be admitted into those residential communities. So in the case of a life planning CCRC, you may feel that you are an independent resident and you meet the requirements of being an independent resident, and you may want to purchase a life plan. But those that are operating the community are going to make a determination. They're going to make a judgment if you meet the criteria to enter as an independent resident. And that's going to focus on your activities of daily living. It's going to focus on your degree of self-sufficiency. If you go into a market rate independent community, again, you may feel and feel strongly that you meet the independent living criteria, but that is going to be a conversation, a dialogue with the community in regards to your degree of independence and self-sufficiency and your capacity around your activities of daily living.
And with that, Jennifer, we have to go. I want to just remind folks that the next session is available online at cwpv.org, and then you click on the calendar and you find it next week. I believe it's December 7th, and you click that as you and then you can register. You can also call our office or send us an email if that proves to be challenging in any way. We'll help you out. This session was recorded, and we will post it to our website, so you can just go to cwpv.org/blog. Probably safe bet is tomorrow afternoon it'll be posted by. I want to thank Jennifer again, and thank all of you for participating and asking such great questions. And we will see you next week. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.